Hi friends, Warren from Crow's Knives. Just thought I would try and share a few tips. I've been asked a lot on how to sharpen knives, and it used to scare me half to death years ago, but as I've got more experience, I realize it's really not that difficult, and so I think I can help you with being able to sharpen them so that you get a very good professional result. One of the things with sharpening is what you use to sharpen. One of the simplest things that I have found is the whetstone. Whetstones can be purchased online like Amazon. There's a company called Sharp Pebble that I use. They have different grits. You can see here, this one is 3,000 and 8,000. I hope you can see that. And the other one here is 400 and 1,000. Those are probably the only two stones or the four grits that you would actually need. The 400 is used for a knife that's in really bad shape. If it's extremely dull and chipped, and when you look at the edges you see marks and ridges on it, that would be what you'd use that for. The 1,000 is for a knife that's in better shape. And you start off with 1,000, then you go to the 3,000 and the 8,000, and you're going to end up with a blade that is perfect for your kitchen. It's not like you're a sushi chef in some very fancy restaurant and need the steps that they go to. Some of them go up to 12,000 grit with their knives in getting them prepared. So those are just a couple of the things. The sandings, or the whetstones are 30 bucks, 40, 50. You can buy more expensive ones. One of the things that you'll want to do though is to make sure you have some sort of tray. For example, this one has a rubber base, and that prevents it from slipping. It can be a bit messy, so you want to do it on towels. The stones themselves come with a rubber base that fits inside that, and it does prevent the slipping. I always try to have it up against something so that when I'm moving the blade, nothing is moving other than just the blade itself. So the other thing with the whetstones is you need to soak them for about 10 minutes or so before you use them. So I just have a little tray of water here, and I set them in for a few minutes beforehand. And once they're wet, then you're all set to go. And I'll walk you through a few things as I start to show you how to use the stones and the knives. To take you into how to sharpen, I have one of the newest recruits to our inventory. It's very good steel. It's a very sharp knife right at this point. Very sharp. And what I want to do is just abuse it a bit, because that way you'll be able to see that even with treatment that you would never give your knives at home, you will be able to sharpen even that type of blade. Just using some stainless steel part of a knife here to dull it up a bit, so that this should make it a little, yeah, there you go. So it's definitely not sharp anymore. We're going to take the 400 grit first of all and work with it. So I'll just take the 400 and put it on top, and this will work out many of the bugs or the kinks for the knife. Now, one of the things I was going to mention to you is angle is fairly important for sharpening. When you think about the angle of a common kitchen knife, it's usually about 18 degrees. It's not that hard to figure, and to be honest, you don't have to be rocket scientists. There are devices that you can put on your knife, for example this one, that will help you set the angle to approximately 18 or 20 for a kitchen knife. But personally, I never use them. They're a little cumbersome, and on smaller knives they don't work that well. And so one of the biggest things that I have found is just by putting your fingers underneath the knife, like so, that gives you about the right angle. So that when you start to work the knife and you hold it at that angle and move it down the stone, you'll get the feel, and it is quite easy to feel, how the angle should be held. And it's not too difficult to do at all. This is the other real critical part, not just the angle, but when you sharpen a knife, you need to be able to feel on the other side of it a burr. Now, are you familiar with burrs? Basically what you're doing is you're filing down the one side of the metal, so it will kind of peel over onto the other side. But the reason that's so critical all the way along the blade is because it shows you're getting the edge of the blade. not just the back side. It's called the shoulder back here, whereas the edge itself is what you want to sharpen. So you get a burr all the way along, you just feel for that, and this has got a nice burr on it except for on this end, so I'm just going to work it a little more to get a burr on that end. And you notice how I'm rotating the knife because of the curve in the blade. Very easy to do. Honestly, after a few knives, you'll be a pro at this. It's quite straightforward. So just like that. And then all you do is basically take your fingers and work the knife back towards yourself. And you'll get a burr on the back side. I don't have enough burr there, so I'm going to work that a little more. I'll just point something else out to you. The top of the whetstone will get dirty and milky looking, and you don't want to wipe that off. That's actually pieces of the stone and the metal that are going to help you sharpen your blade as well. So just leave it on there. It is messy, like I said, you just need a towel. But so that's not too bad at this point. I'm just going to give it one more go here just to make sure that we've got all the chunks and everything after I rattled it against that steel. Make sure the burr is there. Not quite. There we go. And I'll go back the other way now. Every time I send a knife out, whether it's manufactured by someone else or one of my manufacturers, I always make sure that I sharpen them. So what I'm going to do now is I'll just flip this over to the 1000 grit, because we have taken all of the chunks or the dents and scrapes out of that piece of blade and on the edge, and now I'll go to the 1000 grit stone. And basically it's the same thing. I'm just going to wipe this down so that you get rid of some of the older grit that's a little heavier. So, and we'll just do the same thing. So you put your fingers underneath, just get the right angle and just work your way down. Just nice and fluid. And you just feel all the way down and you feel the burr. I didn't quite get enough on that back side there. Now we're just going to do it the other way as well. Handy dandy. I'm dating myself by saying that, I suppose. I'll just show you just after 1000 grit. So this is just the two stones. Already we're back in the land of sharpness. So that wasn't hard, was it? Hey, if I can do it, you can do it. But let's give these other ones a try, and we'll take it up, because what happens now when you take the 3000 and the 8000, what's actually happening is the burrs that are along the edge of the blade are now going to be softened and become even smaller and finer. And that, of course, is what you want when you're cutting a roast or slicing a tomato or whatever the case may be. So again, I'm just going to put my fingers there. Yep, that's coming up really nicely. Perfect. So I'm just going to do it one more time just to make sure I got all the heavier scratches and burrs off of that, so that when we go over to the 8000 grit, then we will have a really fine edge on the knife. All right, here we go. 8000. Again, you feel for the burr, because like I said, when you have the burr, you're actually doing the edge. As long as you're staying within that degree or that angle, you will be sharpening the edge. Some folks even put their thumb underneath it when they bring it across, which is totally fine. But you'll get a feel for it. There we go. So in the space of about 5 minutes, we went from what was a really dull knife to now having a knife that you may not be a sushi chef, but you'll be a chef. So I hope that gives you a good feel for what you can do with a stone. Honestly, if you got the 400 and the 1000 grit stone for your home and had it in your drawer, that's probably all you need. I like to use the finer grits because I want you, when you get a knife from us, to say, wow, this is what a good knife is like. And that is what that extra edge does. But I also wanted to just highlight a couple of things for you about caring for your knives. One of the biggest mistakes many people make is putting a good set of knives into their dishwasher. First of all, it's bad for the handles, it's bad for the metal, and it also will dull your knife. Depending on the type of detergent you have and so on, the chemicals as well as some of the microplastics will dull your knife. So don't ever put them in the dishwasher, just wash them by hand, and then you can keep your knives in great shape. The second thing is some knives have a higher carbon content. Now, we try to tell you when you buy a knife from us that this is a higher carbon content. And why that's a concern is because the higher the carbon content, the more likely it is to rust. So for example, if you put a wet carbon knife into a wood block, for example, it's going to rust in there. If you put it into a leather sheath, even if it's dry in a leather sheath, the leather will attract moisture. So always be careful with that, even if you've got a hunting knife or a knife like that that you put into a sheath, to make sure it's bone dry, and don't leave a carbon knife for long periods in leather. The other thing about the carbon on and the rust that might happen, it's not going to kill your knife. It's just because of the composition of the metal. And so all you have to do really is just a little bit of WD-40 on a hunting knife, or a little bit of canola oil or vegetable oil on your blade, and it just can be a light coat. You don't have to smear it so everything's dripping wet, but just to keep it from having air getting at the carbon. But that's the carbon type of knife. And then one other thing I wanted to mention, and this is becoming more and more a factor, is a lot of the wood blocks that people use are really not that sanitary. You know, you're putting a knife in there, and let's just say the kids have done something, made toast, cut up a piece of chicken, whatever, and they stick the knife blade in there without really cleaning it. All that residue is inside that block, and you know, your chances of, I'm not suggesting you're going to get the bubonic plague, but it's not healthy. So a lot of folks are moving over to an in-drawer knife system, or to bamboo, because bamboo is more sanitary. It's not as porous as some of the other woods like acacia and so on. So it's a protection. And in fact, you can even buy now on Amazon for 25 bucks, you can buy a plastic tray for your knives that you can set them into. There's only one caution with plastic, and that is, even with cutting boards, if you use a glass or a granite or ceramic type of cutting board, you're going to dull your knives big time, because once it cuts through the meat or whatever you're cutting and it hits that, it's going to dull it up big time. So try to stay with wood for your cutting blocks. Plastic is okay, but plastic will dull your knife as well. So just a couple of points, because once you go to all this work and you bought yourself a really nice set of knives and you want to make sure they're useful, those are just a few protections. So I hope this has helped, and thanks for all your support for our small business. We're just trying to supplement our retirement income here, so all your support is much appreciated, and we hope that you've enjoyed the segment on how to sharpen your knives.